trying to do. I'm a retired science teacher. I taught a lot of science courses, all different ages, including astronomy. And I've always wanted to be an astronaut. And when the Heinrich program was announced, I jumped right into it. This was 3 years ago. And I feel like I've almost been in orbit that long. One of the talks, I think it was yesterday, they were talking about the best way to really explore Mars is to have an airship. Float above the surface, and then, be about 15 kilometers high, and then once in a while go down to 2 to 4 kilometers. Now, basically, that's what I did with the Heinrich program. I look at the CTX images, which have a resolution about like it would be if you're maybe 15 kilometers up, and then I suggest targets. And if I get the target, then the resolution then is about like 2 to 4 kilometers above the surface. So it's really neat. It takes a long time, a lot of patience for this. You submit your request, and then a few months later you might get some of your targets. But it's exciting to have these come down. And in the last 3 years, I've looked at a large amount of the planet. I'll show you how much here. Okay, so in the last 3 years, I've taken from 60 degrees north down to 60 degrees south, and I've examined all the surface with the CTX images. That's, I guess, thousands of images. I don't have much of a life, I guess, but I looked at these with CTX images, and the CTX images will give me a resolution about the size of this room here. So if there's an object the size of this room, I'll be able to see it with the CTX images. And then I suggested targets with high rise, and I suggested over 4,500 targets, and so far I've got over 400 back, and I've sort of selected the best for today's talk. So I want to show you, I guess, the prettiest ones. I think the prettiest, where I'd like to walk on Mars. And I found in my research that the ice-rich areas where the boxes are, 30 to 60 degrees north and south, have a lot of glacial features, and they're kind of interesting. Also, in the southern hemisphere, it's very old, a lot of craters, a lot of preserved terrain, so that's kind of interesting to look at. And if you take these 3 craters and go down, you'll find an area which has a lot of gullies. Other places have gullies too, and the gullies are pretty exciting because they might be recent water. And I have one picture that's over here by Gale Crater. Some of you might be able to see there's a crater with a bump in it, and that's Gale Crater. So I even got one that's just right next to Gale Crater. Kind of interesting. And then there's a lot of glacier features are found right in this area. This is Lyle Crater, so you go south from there. There's Dunernils, Coternils, and Nils Cyprus have most of the glacier features for the planet. And then there's Arabia here, has a lot of dust and makes certain features. And then I like it because it has a lot of layered features right in this area. A lot of you have probably seen the layers on Mars, and they're kind of exciting because they may have been put down underneath a lake. These are the locations of the pictures I'd like to show you today. And I love this picture, it's so pretty. I often put these boxes on, that shows the approximate size of a football field. And so a person could probably walk back and forth all around here in a day. And when you have these layers and they're kind of broken up a little bit, here's another view of the same kind of feature, different place. Now this was a big area. This was many miles. This is several miles across in all directions. And next I want to show you a feature that's like this, but it's on Earth. Give you an idea of this. Now the feature we'll see on Earth is maybe about this big. So I'm sort of taking one of these layers and sort of showing you what it looks like on Earth. This is down the road at Red Rocks. It's where they have the concerts. They have the concerts right down in this area here, and this is a really popular place. But this is about the same size of those features we saw, and imagine having features like this cover this whole area there. And that's about how it was in those locations you saw. I would love to walk on that. And that's what people do. I go down to Red Rocks a lot. It's right down the road. And people are always climbing, not always, but they're often climbing on there, even though there's almost a $1,000 fine and jail time. But they risk it because it's so exciting. And it's so pretty down there. I go down there a lot, and there's many tour buses go down there, and people get off and they take pictures. You also have artists down there sketching things. It's so beautiful down there. Another area like this is down the road at Colorado Springs, Garden of the Gods. So these are locations that people love to see. It's a CTX image, and I would sort of look sometimes for layers. And there's certain layers here. You have probably two kinds of materials here. This is probably a mesa covered with a cap rock, like maybe volcanic rock. There's a layer there, another layer there. And then if you go over here, it's a different tone. And then I looked over at this thing, it looks like there's little teeny layers there. Don't know for sure, so I suggested we take a picture of this. And then a few months later, we came up with this, and so there's many, many layers. Now, this is hard to see. This is one of my prettiest pictures, but with the lighting here, we can't see it too well. And I would love to be able to get on one of these layers and just walk along. It would be kind of dangerous. Some people like to have that danger of walking along the edge of that cliff there. Okay. And I found, last week I found an even more exciting place. Just came in. And here's this crater is about like Endeavor Crater. That's where Opportunity is sitting right now. We've heard a lot about Endeavor Crater. And I just got this last week. And we're going to look in this area. Now, it's a large crater. And there's a whole bunch of layers here, sort of like the other ones, but notice where they are. They're way, way above the ground. So if you walk on here, you can have a long fall. Again, people love to do that stuff. So here's these layers, and there's 500 meters, so a guy can get on the edge of one of these layers and hopefully keep their balance and make their way across there, probably several kilometers across there. And it'd be pretty and it'd be dangerous. A lot of us like danger. When you're younger, you like it more of those things. Then another set of features. Now there's a whole lot of pictures of Mars that have these layers. Then there's a whole lot of pictures like this that have these cracks and canyons. And on Mars, it's a very thin atmosphere, and there's a lot of ice in the ground. It's all over the place. It's concentrated in certain areas, but it's in a lot of areas. And what happens is the ice changes directly from ice solid to a gas. And it's mixed with dust. And sometimes it's mixed intimately with the dust. The dust is coated with the ice. When you take the ice away, the dust kind of falls down. And sometimes it blows away. So you're left with cavities, pits and holes and cavities. And that's what we see here. Various size holes and pits and cavities. And I'm going to now enlarge this area. So I would take a picture like this and say, this looks pretty neat. And I probably would have suggested a couple images from this. And we find that, gee, the guy can get one of these canyons here and just walk along for, probably hours, just in the canyon system. And we like canyons. People love to hike in the Grand Canyon. Now, this isn't near as big as the Grand Canyon here. People love canyons. There's a canyon right near Eldorado Canyon, which would be similar in size to this. And it's a really beautiful place right down the road outside of Boulder. Here out west, there's a lot of canyons. If you go there, they're usually like state parks or national parks. A lot of people there walking, hiking, climbing, taking pictures, because we seem to like those things. And then another thing that happens is we have the mesas many places. And around the mesas, you have these glaciers, or they call them low-bay debris aprons. Now, there's another mesa off camera here. And so this is a large glacier here, and the glacier seems to be probably moving this way. Now, sometimes when the glaciers come together, it sort of cracks the surface. When you get a crack, you get more surface area, so more of the ice disappears. More of the ice kind of sublimates, disappears, and then maybe you have the dust blows away. And we're going to enlarge this area here. So we see, again, these nice canyon, the guy getting this canyon, just walking along. This is several kilometers, so a fellow could walk for a number of hours. And basically what happens is you start with, we can't see here with the lighting, but some places here have many tiny cracks. Now a tiny crack will enlarge and get bigger, and then it will get bigger, and it will be a big crack. And if we enlarge these, we have one of my prettiest pictures, I think. This is a football field size. And I think this one would be one you get good to race up, try to get out. Get down in there and see how fast you get out, because this is not a sheer cliff here. You can see over here, there's a certain slant there. So that would be a workout, but it would be doable. And I found these features, and I was all excited when I found this pyramid. It was like an Aztec stepped pyramid. I don't know if you've seen those native pyramids. And I thought it was really strange and everything exotic, and then I started finding a lot more. So I eventually found a lot of these, and I studied the literature, and I found somebody back in, I think, 2000 thought they were the remnants of a layer terrain that existed a long time ago. So maybe this layers, they were slanted, they were all over the place, and then they got eroded, most of them are gone. This is the remnants of it. But they're exciting, and it would be neat to climb up these. And there's the football size. So a guy can go up and down there. He'd probably go out here and easily get on top here and then eventually climb your way down. And then last week I found another one. You can't see it too well. It's dark, but if we had good lighting, it'd be pretty. But here's our football field thing. And on this, you go up and down, and you get good rock samples here. You go along this slope and get rock samples from the bottom, the middle, top. And I like this especially because you've got these big cracks, these crevices. And a guy can get in there and get rock samples right beneath the surface. So it'd be a way of sampling without drilling. And in that same area, saw this mesa, and here's the football size. And of course, the guy can go up and down the mesa, but there's a lot of boulders here, and you probably can't see it with the light, but many places on Mars are big boulder fields. And the boulders are the size of a house, maybe the size of this room here. Or they're pretty big, so there's a bunch of them there. So climbing the boulders is another fun thing to do, maybe. Now, then there's beautiful things. There's these dust streaks, which you probably can't see too well, but a guy could walk along the edges of this cliff here, or along the edge of this crater, and I got a large one of these things. The dark streaks, they start out being dark, and then they fade with age. And at one point, some people thought water was involved and they were getting wet or something, but now we pretty much all agree that they are simply avalanches of dust. So there's bright dust covering up dark material, and then sometimes very small areas, it starts, and then you get the avalanche of bright dust exposes the dark undersurface, and then it slowly fades. We've seen these since the Viking days, and recently a group of researchers looked at the area of dark slope streaks from Viking. They looked at all of them, and then they looked at what we have today, and they found we have the same number, but they were all different. And that was a 40-year span, so we think that they last about 40 years. But they make strange shapes. Now, it'd be nice to get up close here and examine these, just for the beauty. And then we have a couple features that most people think they're pretty. We have taken so far with our spacecraft hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pictures. And once in a while, NASA gets together and they decide on the 10 prettiest pictures we have. And often you have these sand dunes on them, and often you have the layered terrain, and then there's something else we see. So the next couple of pictures are the most beautiful things we have on Mars. And this is basically in history of all of our research, all of our studies. We have various kinds of dunes. The dark is because of basalt. It's a volcanic rock. It gets ground up, and you have a lot of these dunes. Then we're going to next enlarge this little area here, a couple dunes. So we see that each one of these dunes will be a couple hundred meters across. And we have the capability of color here. The center section of the high-rise is taken in several different wavelengths, so we can put it together and get colors. They're not exactly the same as you see with the human eye, but it gives us more information about the minerals. We have studied Mars for a number of years, and what they're doing now is taking the same areas, taking pictures of the same areas over and over, you're looking for changes. And we have seen changes in the sand dunes. Some of them seem to be moving a little bit, but there's a lot of changes with the ripples. This picture shows some ripples on top. And then you can't see too well in the back. The next picture you'll see it better. But this is a field of sand dunes, and the wind came from two different directions, so you got these bowls like of sand. I think it was this Opportunity. One of the craters that examined had these things, but they're so consistent there. I saw this picture, I couldn't believe it. It'd be nice to walk across the cliff, or I could see in the future, especially in this area, the people from this area, Boulder, they like to do crazy things, exercise. They had a mud race a few weeks ago around here. People went through the mud, crawled through the mud, raced through the mud for hours, and they call that fun. But here, you have this is about 5 kilometers from corner to corner. So I can see in the future maybe having a race. See how fast it takes to go across there. The problem is that's not a real not even field there. That's how there's a look at it. It's so consistent all the way across there. These sand dunes, they're almost all exactly the same size and shape. I couldn't believe it, but it's such a large area like that. And then another feature that's considered one of the most beautiful is the dust devil tracks. Each one of these arcs represents a small tornado that went by, dust devil. Now they're sort of small, but on Mars they're kind of big. They're maybe a few hundred meters across, but they're a number of kilometers high. So we could spot them in action from orbit because they have a long shadow. This happens to be a different kind of picture. This is a Mars Global Surveyor picture with their narrow angle camera. At the end of the lifetime of Mars Global Surveyor, after they sort of looked at everything they want to look at, they let the public look at it for a couple of years. So I suggested some targets, and this is one of the ones I found. And this is the one, I love this thing. I had it for a screensaver for a long time. I'm not sure what it is. It's like almost an egg shape. It's like something expanded from underneath and then cracked the surface and made these cracks. I don't know what it is, but it's interesting to look at. A lot of these things are so random, they have a certain beauty of their own. And this, I don't know what it is. You think you've seen it all, and then something like this appears. Now you have the size of a football field. You have all these narrow ridges. And they're so straight on at least one side. And I can imagine walking along the top, it's very narrow along there. And then you have these other ones going at right angles. So maybe there's some sort of sand dune, but they're so straight, and they have these right angles, and I don't know, maybe there's some sort of sand dune. They are found underneath on the bottom of a crater. And then last week I got these pictures. Same sort of thing, and here's the size of the football field, and these look like a lot like sand dunes, but they're vertical and they're skinny. So who knows? You find these things, you get all excited like you discovered something. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but the excitement of discovery is fun. And then there's a whole bunch of these. There's another one there. That's just a composite. So any questions? Thank you.
They're really interesting pictures. Do you think they would ever land like a Curiosity or any of the probes in there? And do you think they could actually traverse some of those Trace, because whenever I see the pictures, I just seem sort of like football flat to me.
Yeah, they did that on purpose. They want to make sure they're safe. I think what they'll do, though, they'll have these rovers that will move around, and they'll land in a flatter area, and they'll be able in the future to get more precise for the landing, but they'll drive into these areas, I think. And I think also what's very probable is they'll send little, maybe have a rover land, and then have these robotic rovers going out to take pictures, and then you can send them out. They'd be small, they could maybe photograph these things closer.
You know, the Viking 2 seemed to land in a rock field, by far the most, it seemed the most treacherous landing of all of the probes so far. Is that what you found? I mean, did you ever look around there, and is that true, or is it still pretty flat?
Well, there's some areas that are really boring. They're flat, and I would maybe go for hours looking at flat surfaces, and it's all the same sort of thing. And then I would go for like 2 hours of work with the CTX pictures, and then I would get something unbelievable. It would just pop up, and there might be a crater there, and the craters cause things, but as I said at the beginning, if you go in the southern hemisphere, it's very old, very cratered, and you get a lot of strange terrains. And if you go around where the glaciers are, you get a lot of strange terrains. A lot of times you go to the north or south, and everything is covered with that mantle deposit, so that smooths things out. But there's areas, I found a lot of areas that are really interesting, a lot of areas are boring. But even a boring area, you go along and all of a sudden there might be an impact crater. It's a fairly recent impact crater, and it's unbelievable, unbelievable. Yeah, thank you. Any other? Yes?
2 questions. Is it possible to get pictures or copies of these pictures?
Yes, now, Mars Society is going to publish the slideshow. So I'm going to probably send in next week the whole slideshow with the notes and everything. And then we also have an opportunity of writing a paper on this. So we have to have that in by October, end of October. So probably at some point I'll have a paper written on. Now in the paper I'll have a lot more details, and I'll have a lot of references. But this slideshow I'll send in next week, so you have a copy of all that. And you see my name there. This is a small sampling of all the pictures I've got. Some people collect stuff. I collect these pictures, but on my website, on my Facebook page, under Jim Secosky, I've got hundreds of pictures, and I got like a caption, so it has the name of the number of the photograph, and it has the location, and it usually tells you something about what it is. A lot of them I don't know what they are. I look in the literature for what they might be, but a lot of them I don't think they've looked at yet. It's my guess that a lot of these pictures, there's so many coming in that a lot of people haven't looked at it very much. I'll get a CTX image, and I might spend a couple minutes on it, but I might spend an hour or 2 on it. I don't know if there's too many scientists that have that much time. There's like thousands and thousands and thousands of these pictures, so I'm not sure if all these CTX images have been examined very much. There's probably a big need for people like us to look at them and see what's on it. Somebody have a question back?
Yeah, those sort of chevron-shaped sand dunes, I call the real angular ones, that's really unusual. Have you ever seen an Earth analog for that? I have.
The best analog is on the bottom of some craters. I forget the name of the crater, but Opportunity landed, and then it examined a number of craters, and one of the bigger ones, one of the first and bigger ones it looked at, had these on the floor, but there was only a small number. This goes on for miles. That's the strange thing.
It's hard to explain, because the wind would have such a corrupt change in direction over a big, large area.
Yeah, it's strange. Strange. And as I do this, I find strange things that shouldn't be there. But I think that's what NASA wants. They want people to look at it and find the strange things. I think a lot of the people are just looking for certain kinds of things. Not strange things, but they have the research. They're looking for certain things. My question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you found any evidence of water in lower latitudes, say 0 to 10 degrees?
Well, there's a lot of channels, smaller channels there. And I found, I guess, there's some channels and things. I haven't found any, anything like these, but there's layers, a lot of layers of Noctis labyrinthus is near the equator. And there's layers, there's a lot of layers on the bottom. So there may have been I'm guessing there was probably lakes on the bottom of Noctis labyrinthus because of the layers. And some researchers have found a few gullies and various things around the equator. They're rare, but some people have found. Good question. You guys got one of your questions? Yes, sir.
So in one of the pictures you showed the feature which looked like the step pyramids from South America, although in a different shape. So those look like eroded sedimentary creations. But that was sitting inside a crater. Does that mean that it's relatively new, like a new feature?
Well, that's what I thought. I was always mixed up with that, and then I found this. Michael Carr wrote a paper around year 2000 based on Mars Global Surveyor. He had those things, and he said they were the remnants, and I didn't understand it quite. And then I got another book, a recent book, and there's a crater. I think it's called Danielson Crater, and it's a big crater, and along the edges it looks just like that. And what they seemed to say was what you had the crater, and you had a lake in there maybe, and you had all these layers. And then after a while, maybe the middle settled, so the layers became tilted on the edges. And now we're talking about things that nobody knows the answers. We're just guessing at this point. We're making observations, we're seeing strange things, and now we're coming up with guesses. And that's the best guess. But so what it could have been was the layers, tilted layers along the edge of the crater. They could have filled the whole thing up, and then almost all that eroded. And then it may have been covered up with things for a billion years or so. And then they eroded back. So they might be, you say, exhumed. And we see that a lot on Mars. It was a discovery that there's a lot of things that were buried, and then they're now being unburied. We see them. They're not fresh, but maybe a billion years old, but they're being unburied, so they're kind of fresh dust. But it's a lot to study there at Mars. If you like geology, it's really a challenge. Yes, sir.
Second question. Those basalt dunes seem particularly weird, both in shape and in position. The surrounding terrain appears to be rocky, which, I mean, I don't have much of a background in geology, but I don't know, it just doesn't seem to quite fit. And I was wondering if that's maybe some insight that might.
Now, the overall shape of the dune, okay, that is a hardened dune. So there's certain sand dunes are shaped that way. I think it's maybe when you don't have a whole lot of sand. So instead of the sand dune covering a whole lot of area, it's in a smaller area. But those are found on Earth. That's a typical dune shape, the round or the oval shape of the notch. And it's funny to have the light colored surface on the bottom, but that's the way it is. Now all the pictures that we get, they adjust them automatically. So if you get a picture, they take the brightest thing on that picture and they make it sort of white. Then they take the darkest thing and make it black. Now, if you compare that to something else, though, that white might actually be dark. But they take each individual picture, and there's a special term used for it, but they stretch it or something so that the darkest thing is black, and the lightest thing is white. But that white may not be really white like we see. It might be a dull color, it might be gray.
So in each image, they're maximizing contrast.
Yes, I think
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Do you think the dust is forming a partial seal over the ice, reducing sublimation?
Yeah, that's what most people are saying that, yes. That there's a cap over top of the ice. They've looked at huge areas on Mars with the radar, and what they're seeing is dust on top or dirt on top, meters deep. They're surprised it's so thin. And then underneath is pure ice. And it pretty much pure ice, not ice mixed with a lot of dirt, but pretty much pure ice. So we're lucky there. We found a lot of ice on Mars in a lot of locations, and we can find out where it is. We can find out from orbit before we land. We don't have to just walk around and look for it. Any other questions? I guess that's it. Thank you very much.